is just wildly inappropriate. And yet, I'm really glad you're here.
Your actions were totally inappropriate.
For some reason, he felt that it was inappropriate.
Look into the camera and say something inappropriate.
You don't get personal. That is totally inappropriate behavior.
How inappropriate!
What exactly about my methods are inappropriate?
He tweeted some inappropriate things.
That's a little inappropriate, don't you think?
At what point is it inappropriate?
No, inappropriate. Inappropriate. Stop it right now.
Toby, that is unbelievably inappropriate.
You're vulgar. You're inappropriate.
That's just grossly inappropriate.
Wow, you are so inappropriate.
It's such an inappropriate description.
Inappropriate, but precise.
Oh, you know what's inappropriate?
It's completely inappropriate! Why?
That's inappropriate! That's inexcusable!
Inappropriate things.
Be totally inappropriate.
Inappropriately so.
How very inappropriate, thank you.
Inappropriate.
It's wildly inappropriate. This is incredibly inappropriate.
This is highly inappropriate.
Okay, this is inappropriate. Grossly inappropriate.
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 Oh, hello. This is the RPGPundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And this is Inappropriate Characters. Hello, everyone. Tonight, I'm joined, as usual, by Venger Satanis and Ryan David.
What's up?
And I hope everyone can hear us out there. I just want to make a sound check before I introduce our guest here. Can you guys hear me?
And me.
I hear you just fine.
Sounds okay.
Yeah.
Well, we always hear each other, but I mean, lately, to be frank, since Ryan took over, we haven't seemed to have problems with this, but it's good to check. Okay, audio loud and clear. So, as advertised, tonight we have a very special guest who is he's a return player on Inappropriate Characters. He's been here before. It's Greg Gillespie, who is the creator of the Barrow Maze module and other products. But if you want to hear about those, you can probably watch the previous issue of Inappropriate Characters that he was guest starring on. And today we're going to be talking about his newest project with him, which is a actual RPG called Dragon Slayer Classic Fantasy Role-Playing Game. We're also going to be talking about a number of other things, I'm sure. I don't know how much we planned what those other things are. I think there's one other main topic at least, and then some weirdness from Venger. But as usual, we're also going to be answering your questions for us or for Greg. And yeah, we're going to be having a good time, I hope. So, Greg, welcome again to Inappropriate Characters.
Thank you so much for having me. And geez, Venger shows up with the old banana peel gag, and I'm empty-handed. I feel like I should have had some gag ready to go.
Yeah.
Hey, next time, bring a whoopee cushion, and you'll be all set. All right, we'll do.
So, Greg, sorry, go ahead, Ryan. You wanted to add something?
I was going to say I need a prop too, but I it's going to be hard to top the banana. So
it really is.
You've set the bar very high, my friend.
I wasn't even trying, but cool. Oh,
I still have this to unbox. Yeah.
All right.
And now we're
so Greg, probably, yeah. So Greg, you've done a new RPG. It's called Dragon Slayer Classic Fantasy Roleplaying. And I guess my first thought would be, what were you thinking? What was why did you decide to make your own RPG system, and what did you expect from it?
Well, what I wanted to do was to make a game that would provide solid footing under my feet for years to come from a publication standpoint, and that I wouldn't be beholden to anybody else or anybody else's rule system or moving forward. So that's first and foremost, to provide solid ground for myself, and then also, I've not really been what's the word I'm looking for? Excited, impassioned about the kind of our old school RPG that's currently out on the market. Some might have some great writing, okay, but the art's not that great. Some might have some great art, but there's gaps in layout. Sometimes the art's internally inconsistent. Sometimes the game isn't written concisely, or it's too verbose. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to bring my creative wherewithal to a book that had a very tight layout with internally consistent art that reflected the mechanics and that was inspired by the zeitgeist that we all remember from the early 1980s. And if I can do that, then I've succeeded. Part of it too, quite honestly, is kind of like a counterfactual thought experiment where, so that we know AD&D was created in large part to try to keep Arneson from getting royalties. But what if Gygax and Arneson stayed together? What if there wasn't that sort of messy divorce? What would D&D have looked like later on by the earlier mid 80s? And it could very well have taken a path where it kept the basic engine and just started adding what would be the chrome of AD&D. And so in that line, I consider Dragon Slayer to be sort of a thought experiment in the what if range, where we're merging the engine of BX with the chrome of AD&D.
Okay, so the first thing that comes to my mind in your response there, probably a fairly simple question to answer, is you said that you had concern regarding the being able to have your own system that you could rely upon. Was that something that happened as a result of the WotC OGL 1.1 crisis?
It was part of it, but it wasn't the only reason. So when I started thinking about publishing Barrow Maze, there were kind of limited systems. There was, Swords and Wizardry, and there was a couple others. But I've always played like, I guess James Malczewski once said D&D 0.75, where it's halfway between BX and AD&D, insofar as you're using the engine, but you're not using the silly stuff like counting segments, and you're not doing weapon speed modifiers and things of that nature. It's things that, for me personally, kind of make the game actuarial science, and when it hits that tipping point, I'm less interested in accounting for that kind of stuff in the evening, which is most often when I play. So part of it was the OGL stuff, for sure, and then part of it was just I needed to ensure going forward that I'm in control of the rule set. The rule set best reflects what I've been doing at my table all the way along. And anybody that's read Barrow Maze or any of the mega dungeons that I've done, you can see it's not situated strictly in BX. It's always leaned towards AD&D, and that's how we played back in the very early 80s, because we had the BX books, and then all of a sudden the Monster Manual came out and these modules came out, and we were just playing them with how we knew how to play. And what we didn't understand in the High Gygaxian of the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide, we were just like, well, we're kids and this doesn't make any sense to us, so we're just gonna keep playing the way we're playing. and Dragon Slayer definitely feels like that.
Right. We had.
Well, that's very true. There was a lot of that in the 80s. I think probably the majority of gamers played like that, where they didn't necessarily respect the boundaries between AD&D First Edition and Basic Expert Set, and they just kind of used whatever they had on hand. Sorry, Ryan, you were going to say something.
Respect the boundaries.
No, I was on the exact same thing. You know, we had Rules Cyclopedia, we had AD&D, we had all of our original stuff, and we used what worked for our campaigns. So, you know, unifying this into a product is totally logical, and it makes brilliant sense. So, I'm on board.
Venger and Ryan, have you guys actually read this game?
No.
Have you had a chance to look at Dragon Slayer?
I've seen a lot of the materials, courtesy of our good friend Diversity and Dragons. But I have not read the materials, so I am looking at this, you know, with very fresh eyes and listening intently from the horse's mouth. No pressure, Greg. No. Sell me a book.
I have not.
I can deal with it.
I have not read an RPG rule book in years. I think really. Since I started creating my own, I've just kind of like just immersed myself in my own thing. Just doing it.
I was about to say, Venger has read no RPG rule books, not even his own.
and letting it evolve organically rather than, I don't know. I don't like chasing any fads, and I don't like feel the need to, I don't know, have something that's already been like done a few times, like put a new coat of paint on it and like a couple of little tweaks in here and there. You know, I'm not going to like reread a whole book that's, I don't know, that's a retro clone unless I'm going to use it. And I'm perfectly happy myself using what I, you know, have created for myself. I'd be interested in asking Greg before this game, what I assume you were using like a different OSR rule set. And what was that before you created this?
Well, I started with Labyrinth Lord at the time and the reason was simply that it was the closest to what I was playing at home in my home game, but not my home game. And so what we did is we had a wiki, and on the wiki went a fair number of the rules tweaks that we made over time. Not everything, but the gist of it. And the gist of it is still there, and you can see it pulled from the wiki right into Dragon Slayer. So these are things that we were constantly tweaking, modifying, things that you know, as every group does to make them make good players buy in. And then mechanically, does it work? Is the DM happy with it? Are the players happy with it? And the dialogue that goes back. So this has been played at the Dragon Slayer has been played at my table for a long, long time. We're very content with how it plays. We're very excited about it, and it's you know, there's an opportunity in there to the backwards compatibility is very important for me to TSR to TSR D&D. That's what the OSR means. It's compatible with TSR D&D, and so you can play anything new created by any OSR system with Dragon Slayer, and then it's important to keep that back library. So if you have that library of PDFs, or you played back in the day and you have that library of modules that you enjoyed, you'll be able to play with those one-to-one without any problem. So that's really important for me, and it's out of respect for Gary Gygax. It's out of respect for, you know, all the artists and designers and folks that worked at TSR to craft what I thought was a classic game. It still is a classic game, and then it just has a series of tweaks that are specific to my table. But having said that, those tweaks are interesting. It plays faster where it should play faster, plays slower where it should play slower, and that's reflective of organic playing at the table.
I think that's great. So I admit that I'm not the target audience. I've never bought or read Shadow Dark or Old School Essentials, or before it was Old School Essentials, when it was something else. I don't like myself. Yeah, if you religiously look at like the Kickstarters that come out, there's probably in the last 5 years like a dozen different, you know, OSR rule sets or retro clones or whatever.
I'll bet you
I pay attention to what comes out because I'm interested. And sometimes, I'll listen or I'll read discussion about if there's like a new mechanic or two or something that's quite a bit different. Because I'm interested in game mechanics as a designer, but I'm the weirdo because I don't have the urge to.
This is
to just read a whole nother RPG. I know a lot of people do. There's thousands of people out there that are supporting the Kickstarter, and I think it's great that people put out their thing. It's just I'm not. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a consumer on that.
This is where we're supposed to be right now. Yeah, a year post the OGL nonsense, the dust hasn't settled yet. And as you pointed out, there have been a whole bunch of Kickstarters and things with new systems. There will be more. And then what happens is these things go out into the marketplace of ideas, and based on merit, they rise or they fall. And that's exactly the way it should be.
That's very true. So I've done the actual heavy lifting of this group as usual. I've read your book. I want to
heavy lifting right here, Pundit. Right here.
I want to comment for the education of my co-hosts and also for the viewership that may not have bought or looked at Dragon Slayer yet. So Dragon Slayer is in an interesting position in the context of OSR design, which is that you have clone games, which are games that are direct copies of old editions of TSR, right? So that'll be like Osric, OSE, Labyrinth, Lord, Swords and Wizardry, and so on. Then you have like the second wave OSR products, which are games that have significant alterations to the rule system to fit usually a particular genre. So it'll be like Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and most of Kevin Crawford. Well, no, actually Kevin Crawford's games verge in between second and third, but there are several of these games that are OSR but have a completely different genre thematic and will have significant rule changes. And then there's the third wave, which are games that are designed to present a specific setting and context, right? So that's some of Crawford's work. It's most of my stuff, right? And Venger's the OSR products he's made, and several other people, of course. I don't want to list the whole thing, but your game, if I have to define it, would be, and you're not alone in this because there have been several of these. In some ways, it's a kind of subgenre of its own, is what I would call a near clone, in that it is mechanically it has very significant similarities. It could have been. It's a product that could have been, and even I found it very interesting that you were talking about how to you this was a speculation in your head of what might have happened if instead of AD&D you had an ongoing D&D project of Gygax and Arneson if they had gotten along. Because this product could totally have been something published by TSR in theory. Mechanically, it is extremely similar to the core D&D rules with relatively very few variations, but it does have some stylistic variations, and it borrows stuff from multiple different editions, and including some things that are a little bit less common in some OSR games. So, for example, in your character generation, you have people roll 3d6 7 times, drop the lowest number, and then put the stats where they want, right? Which is not in any way radical, right? That's something that's been going on for ages, but in most OSR games, you'll often get 3d6 in order, that's it, right? Six times in order, right? So that's a variation that is almost brings it like a little bit closer to second edition. Level 1 characters start with full hit points. Again, that's very similar to stuff from second edition. But other than that, you're like really sticking to the core principles, right? The attribute modifiers are right out of Basic Expert. You do have the races are in some ways more similar to AD&D. You also have the Cyclops Man, which is an addition, a race that does not appear in any edition of D&D. So you add some touches of stuff that no doubt comes from your own play. But it's the art is really fantastic and very aligned to the game, and has a style that it reminds me of some of the later 80s TSR stuff, especially stuff like, it makes me think of stuff that I from my recollections. It makes me a little nostalgic of the Gazetteer series or the Rules Cyclopedia. But it's not quite that, right? It's just kind of homage to that sort of style, maybe. And it's a very coherent product, right? But ultimately, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right? There is relatively very few distinctions that make it. I mean, it has things that makes it different from any of the other clones or near clones, but nothing that makes it very radically different.
No.
So I guess the question would be, what would someone want from a clone or near clone that you would say, well, if this is what you want, then you should pick Dragon Slayer instead of OSE or Labyrinth Lord or any of these other clones or very close to clone products.
Sure. Well, that's a fair comment. So the first thing is that I have no pretensions to be Gary Gygax. There's only one Gary Gygax. And I think he made a classic game. And it's a classic game that doesn't necessarily need to be remade and remade. And we have this wealth, this archive of 40 years of TSR D&D that is amazing and worth playing and worth replaying. So that's the first thing. I see myself as a torchbearer for his game.
Not a torchbearer?
If I'm a torchbearer, I'm happy to be one. So there's that. And then the other part of it too is, so you mentioned OSE. So number one, I'll just be very forward with you. As much as I love the OSC guys, the things that I personally don't like about OSC are that I don't like digest-sized books. In fact, they make me want to gouge my eyes out. I need art that's internally consistent. So I don't want to see fairy tale art on one page and low fantasy thieves and murderers on the next, followed by something else yet again, followed by something else yet again. And I don't want to see
that's
big,
really
huge gaps.
interesting, though, because sorry, let me interrupt for a second. That's very interesting because if you look at almost all of the TSR manuals, right? Certainly AD&D First Edition, definitely the Rules Cyclopedia, though that one was maybe a little more consistent. They do that. They have always you can have this really kind of sword and sorcery image on one page, then it's kind of high fantasy on the other, and then this cartoon that would be printed out of Mad Magazine on the third,
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's true. And I don't deny it. However, if we were to look at all the plot points and then say, are there outliers? We would say, yes, there are outliers. But do the majority of the data sets fall within a certain set? And I would agree that they do. Okay. So having said that, acknowledged your point, I do think there is coherence to the art as it was expressed. And that's one of the things I really wanted to do in Dragon Slayer. And often, if you see a piece of art, it's because there's something reflected on that page or on the facing page related to that art. For example, the full page standing stone illustrations relate to druids using standing stones in their casting, or the homage to the street on roads. You've got the wizard spell opposite it. So everything is very neatly considered. And if you consider the book from a 2-page layout, so for example, all the classes are on a 2-page layout. You really don't need to flip if you don't want to. And that's designed for the player who might be coming to the game for the first time. And, we're always going to be page flipping in RPGs. But if you can do your layout such that you're going to minimize a little bit of that page flipping, that's a bonus. And I've definitely tried to do that in Dragon Slayer. So to get back to your point, I look at a lot of OSR rule sets and I'm not inspired. I'm just not inspired. It doesn't make me want to pick the book up. It doesn't make me want to open it. It doesn't make me want to roll. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to find artists that are top-notch, that understand the material and can execute, and can also take art direction. And then from there, now we're ready to rock and roll. And now we have art that reflects the mechanics, the aesthetic, the look, and the design, and they're working seamlessly together. So that's how I would say Dragon Slayer differs from some of the other rule sets, not all, but some that I see out on the marketplace right now.
Yeah. So to now say some of the really positive aspects of it, I would say, so first of all, this game is really, really complete. It's very well organized. It's very easy to read, and it has it certainly knows its focus, right? Like it is. I reading it, I had the impression that it is absolutely the kind of game that would be used very well with Barrow Maze, for example, right? And with that kind of classic dungeoneering adventure. It has rules for designing dungeons and stocking them. It has very detailed sections on magic items, with a lot of really classic ones and some interesting new additions like the rune stones and things like that. And it has, it's just very, it's got a lot of focus on, resource management and the kind of classic adventuring, right? So certainly someone who's wanting to emphasize that can do very well. But it also has a lot of, incidental stuff that adds to it. It has, carousing rules and all kinds of things along those lines. So I think that it's a very complete game. It's very well organized. And if someone's looking for something that would be a kind of archetypal rule set for especially the kind of classic dungeoneering plus overland fantasy, it would be a very good purchase. And I guess that's your emphasis.
Well, yeah, I'm a procedural dungeon crawler. So I think that, there is a procedure to it that helps keep players alive, helps keep DMs on track. And that's my players. Like, I can put out like plots in town. I can put out overland, do this or that. They're like, no, we just want to get in there, dungeon crawl, get the gold, kill the monsters, and move and cast some spells and move along. So, and even the play sessions I have up on YouTube, it's all very highly procedural dungeon crawling, and that definitely comes out. Now, one of the things that I've tried to do to distinguish Dragon Slayer from other books is, when it comes to RPGs, we often have there are the written rules of RPGs, and then there are the unwritten rules of RPGs. And those are kind of like the ones you learn from watching your older brother play role-playing games, or your cousin or something. And those aren't often written down. So what I tried to do in the appendices is to take an opportunity. There's a FAQ or an FAQ where it's kind of like a question and answer for like the new person who doesn't really understand how an OSR game is supposed to be played. Why is it so lethal? How are you supposed to survive? And then there's other kind of sage advice, quick hitting sort of information on with a little bit of humor, written in a more casual tone. So say, someone outside of our generation is coming from 5e, and they're like, well, okay, how do you play an OSR game? And why is it so lethal? Well, they can go to the appendices and they can look at some of that information that's written in a more entertaining tone, the more casual language, and they'll be able to piece it together and maybe have a giggle or a grin at what they read.
And I was just going to ask, Pundit pointed out that, Venger and I were stunad, right? We did not do our homework, so to speak, but you alluded to earlier how this is sort of the amalgamation of what you knew from the rules in BX in Advanced and what you brought from your table. So these appendices are where the from the table bit is, right?
Yeah. So these are things like, how do you survive? What do you spend your gold on? Should you write a backstory? Is it even worth it? How do you get 3,000 experience points. How do you attack and defend? What are some of the thought processes? Because a lot of young people, if they're perhaps coming from a WotC edition, they don't understand that the game came from, in part, historical miniature wargaming. And the more versed we are in basic battlefield tactics, the more Dungeons and Dragons makes sense. And your spells and your weapons can't overcome being outclassed in an engagement. You're going to have to either run away, or you're going to have to set a trap, or lie, connive, cheat, do whatever you have to do to overcome the fact you're at a disadvantage. So, those are some of the things that I tried to talk about in the appendices. And really, my games like Barrow Maze and the others, it's very much about what I didn't, is a response to what I didn't like about TSR Mega Dungeons, as much respect as I do have for TSR. And Dragon Slayer is as much a response to what I didn't like and don't see in OSR rule sets. So doesn't give everybody their due. Everyone's doing the best they can, putting their best foot forward. But just for me, as I look around the landscape, this is very much me. It's very much my personality. So I like to carry myself with a little bit of humor, and I like to remind ourselves it's a game, that we can be the game can be self-reflexive, that it's a game, and that to us as gamers is funny. So those are the kind of things that I think as people are reading through, they'll have a few little smiles with some Easter eggs tucked down in deep.
Fair enough.
So where can people buy it?
Drive through. That's where it is at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, because you had a Kickstarter, but that's done, right? You finished the Kickstarter and it went out pretty well.
Yeah, that was in September. So I've been working on this for some time. It was a matter of taking all the notes that we had on the wiki and from our game, and then I started to revise those the winter before the OGL nonsense. And then once the OGL stuff hit, it was like, okay, like the game has changed. We're moving into a different time, and the dust is up in the air. It hasn't settled yet. It's time to move forward. And as we know, it's the 50th anniversary of the game this year, and this is the time and the place.
Sounds good. Any last thoughts that you want the audience to know before we look at our first talking point of the night about Dragon Slayer, Greg? Floor's yours, and then we'll say hello to our friends in the chat and talk about our first point.
Yeah, all I suggest is that if people get a chance to take a look at it, I know, because part of the OSR way is to home rule everything, and I totally respect that, because that's exactly what I do too. But I would encourage you just to give it a session or two as it's written, to get a feel for how we've played, and this is the rule set that inspired the Mega Dungeons that I've done. So give it a chance, and then after you give it a chance, rule set to your heart's content, or home rule to your heart's content, I should say.
So I'm going to look at, just before we go on to our next topic, Ryan, I want to look at some of the comments on the chat, or make at least a bit of an overview of it. There's obviously some people that are very happy to see you on here. As Panther said, awesome to see Dr. Gillian. Going to introduce my group to Barrow Maze in a few weeks.
You got some fans too, Greg, in the chat.
There are some people who said they've picked up the book. We just had a message there from Diversity and Dragons. He says he just got the book and it's very beautiful. But there's also some people who are, I think, cynical, you could say, about having another near D&D core rule book. I'm
okay with that, because hey, I'm one of us. I mean, I'm cynical. So everyone else has a right to be too. I don't begrudge that whatsoever. At the end of the day, this is written, unlike with due respect to Gary Gygax and writing in High Gygaxian, I write in a very accessible manner and a very accessible style with accessible language. So if a 11-year-old or a 12-year-old does pick up this book, they're not going to have to translate to get to the point of, well, what does this rule mean? So that's another thing. You always have to consider your audience. And when you're writing a rule book, you're not just doing it for the people who are the veteran gamers who've been playing for decades. You have to assume a young maybe somebody's young cousin or son or daughter might pick up the book, and how can they make sense of it? So you're writing for different audiences. It's a bit different than, say, if you're writing an adventure for, the veteran, savvy, experienced TSR gamer. And I love to, those are my people. Those are the people I write for 99% of the time. I just had to take a different approach with the rule book, and I'm sure people can understand it.
Yeah. So Calvinoni says he's still waiting to get his book. Some people were commenting on the price of the book because from what I see here on drive-through, at least, the black and white hardcover book, which is the singular version, I believe, that you've got there, is $80. That includes the PDF, apparently.
Yep. PDF's only $30 though, so that's very acceptable.
Let's see. The book, by the way, just for the audience, is 300 pages long, basically. 298 technically, but yeah.
155,000 words.
All right. I think we're basically caught up there. There's, yeah, we're up to date. So, Ryan.
I was going to say, like with any product, like with all of us, people have to find the one that fits their table. Jeff from Descartes said it best. There's so much in the OSR, and it's so broad because it's the entire philosophy. You have to find the one that's a match for you. So the folks that are high on the book in the chat, awesome, and the folks that are a little critical, it may not be the book for you, and that's sort of where we're at.
I embrace that. I don't mind being questioned, and I don't mind any of that, because I do the same thing when I look at RPGs too. And I want, when I make a book, I want it to be practical and amazing at the table, but I also want it to be a coffee table book. So if you put that on your coffee table, it's immediately go, oh, what's that? Let's have a discussion about it. So I want the steak and I want the sizzle when it comes to these kind of things. And I do, whether you've supported it, you might support it in the future, or you're skeptical, I just appreciate people taking a look.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, that there's some people that also kind of believe that one rule set is the best for everything, and that isn't really true, right? Like, so you got to look at a rule set, what it's made for principally, right? And in your case, Greg, this game is very clearly made for the kind of classic indie module style adventure, right? The dungeon crawling, maybe some overland travel, fighting monsters, getting treasure, developing your character, and so on and so forth, right? So sometimes people want to take a rule set and want to apply it to every context. And in a way, the OSR can do that, right? But it does that by modifying the rules to fit the context. So, I had a debate not like 2 days ago, I think it was, with people who were trying to shoehorn how they would fit 1 gold equals 1 XP into certain types of games, right? And my answer to that as well, in certain types of games, you shouldn't have that, right? Like in Lion and Dragon, we don't have that because that doesn't really actually fit at all with the medieval paradigm. For starters, there were no gold pieces in the Middle Ages, right? Gold coins were practically non-existent, right? But besides that, the classes, half of the classes should not be looting bodies for copper coins, So the answer there is to change it, right? So if you're trying to run a game that is a certain type of emulation, you use one set, and if you're trying to run a game for a different type, you use another, right? And really, the real question you should ask is, in terms of, for example, Dragon Slayers, is that kind of gaming, the kind of gaming Dragon Slayer is made for, is that something that I run? Because most DMs run different kinds of games at different times, right? So they might have a game that's like sword and sorcery, they might have a game that's like very gritty, another one that's high fantasy, and they might have some that are like just the kind of the dungeon crawling and the classic sort of game. And so if you do play the classic sort of game from time to time, what you need to look at is, out of the systems that do that really well, which is the one that's right for me, because
100%.
That's part of the reason that you have multiple OSR games, because depending on what campaign you want to run, a different game is going to suit it.
Yeah, we're very locked in what kind of game we enjoy at my table, and as I said, I mentioned the procedural dungeon crawling. And if people are interested, we put up 4 YouTube sessions where I ran people through Special Barrow Maze Crypt. So you can check that out if you're interested. And we had some good laughs and some fun hijinks, as often happens at the table. So those are available on YouTube.
Very cool. Very cool.
Ryan, go ahead. Sorry, we've been
I was
delaying
gonna say,
the next subject.
No. It's good. I just wanted to really get Venger's take on the next subject, and I know he has something that he's bringing to the table too, and I don't want to come up against bedtime tonight. Just not too early.
Yep,
so.
Don't do it. Not on Daylight Savings Day.
I mean, because you're going to
Don't do it.
Venger, I'm your dungeon master. I'm not your therapist. We're seeing this come up once again.
Don't do it! Don't do it!
Oh. And we're demonetized.
Again,
we're done.
We're somehow demonetized twice.
Well, guys, it's been a good show while it lasted.
Well, you know what's ironic, guys? The last 6 episodes, sorry about that, everybody. I know that sounded terrible. The last 6 episodes have had to go to manual review for monetization. So I think it's just automatic now because it's coming down right away. Thanks for the pennies, YouTube. Anyway, back to the therapy. I'm your dungeon.
Remember, if you want to help us out, super chats are welcome.
Yes, because that's really the way to support the show, because that at least.
And Patreon. Don't forget our Patreon.
We have Patreon. There's also a PayPal link. All of those are viable options. And those
or just buy Charles.
Are usually cheaper than a therapy session. Now, Pundit, you said you saw an article about this. I missed that one this week, but
the British ultra-leftist newspaper, The Guardian, just came out with an article. I think it was less than 48 hours ago, where they were saying they were commenting, probably on account of it being the 50th anniversary of D&D, that somebody did a study and has now made the claim that playing Dungeons and Dragons can be a viable form of therapy, right? And their argument for this claim is that, this is, I have mixed opinions about this, because some of this is probably true in certain ways, right? That playing D&D reduces stress and it improves people's moods, and it creates situations of it has other therapeutic uses, like they said it generates empathy and stuff. I don't know. The first two I think are the first two are probably true much of the time, right? That if you like D&D and you're playing it reduces your stress, because all forms of play reduce stress in a way. That's part of the reason human beings play, right? And that it can improve your mood. Yes, sure. If you're having a good session, you're having fun. If having fun improves your mood, right? But those are just kind of obvious things, right? But then the way they were going about it was definitely to try to suggest that the playing a D&D could be applied in an intentional therapeutic context, right?
I think.
So I just thought that was very funny,
It speaks to the ego that a lot of the new folks to the hobby are bringing with them to the hobby. It's imposing their psychological issues on a table, and I have a real problem. Yeah, I acknowledge we all play because we find value in that game. We get to express ourselves. We get to relax. It's a stress release. It's a social setting. But when you cross the line and you make it such that there is an expectation of anything, whether it's backstory, whether it's fudging dice, that's going around again, or whether it is, you need to help me with this or not help me by excluding this from your campaign. It goes both ways, right? Safety tools, that whole garbage. Then we get into different territory. I'm there, whether I'm a player or a DM, for the same reasons that you are, to get those ancillary benefits. To expect them is a different thing, and that's where the whole therapy thing just rubs me the wrong way. The people that are inserting it into therapy as a therapeutic tool in their sessions. Man, I really question
it's one thing
their
if you're an
professionalism.
actual therapist. Even then, it's stupid, right? But it's another thing if you're just claiming that, if you're just a DM claiming that what you're doing with a group of people is therapy when it's actually playing D&D, right? And it's especially stupid if you start making it more about therapy than about D&D, right?
Hey, we got a first super chat of the night. Our friend, the Ultra American TTRPG, or $5. I'm your DM, not your therapist. Straight from the horse girl's mouth. Love each and every one of you. Hey, Ultra, we love you too. Thank you so much for your support. You had to bring in horse girl, man.
Horse girl is Spider Jack is the new horse girl.
Venger,
right?
We've got to stream horse girl, and you have to play it.
All right, I'll play it. Hell, maybe I'll even game master it. Whatever you guys want.
It's a solo game, right? It's solo. Where the hell was I? Oh, but no, you're right. Everything that I've seen with these people saying, "Hey, I'm using this as therapy," I've not seen a licensed therapist, a PhD. I'm seeing like TAs that are on the 7-year undergraduate plan saying, I'm using therapy in my session.
You know what I think the real problem is that people using therapy today, or that want to get therapeutic uses out of gaming, are weak. And it's that weakness that brings everything down to the lowest common denominator and kind of like instills the wrong values and perpetuates the wrong belief system. If people used a stronger philosophy, like, I don't know, rugged individualism, or trying to meritocracy, or just trying to be the best person you can, not trying to run away from obligations and responsibilities and the bonds that we have with our friends and family and community and country and everything else. But if you run towards those things, then I think almost accidentally, role-playing games can be a wonderful therapeutic hobby. But not if if your life is already a disaster and you're using it as yet another crutch to support your weakness. Then, no matter what you're going to do, it's going to be a fail.
Well, historically, the discipline of psychology has done role-playing games no favors. You'll recall there were a bunch of publications in the late 80s and 90s asking the question effectively, are gamers and war gamers inherently more violent because they play violent games, which was a rubbish presupposition then. It's a rubbish argument now. And if there was a connection, we'd have a huge 50-year laundry list of crimes done by people who play games. And the reality is that people that play games are not inherently more violent than anybody else. So, psychology has done RPGs no favors.
The side effect of that claim is that you get certain people trying to push RPGs to somehow be less violent, and that's how you end up with garbage like several recent Wizards of the Coast products, like Wild Beyond the Witchlight, where your characters are punished if they engage in combat, right? Or games like or books like the Radiant Citadel, where you're spending time basically being a fantasy tourist, or Strixhaven, where you're a college student whose life is a hot mess and going to prom, right? Like that there's a direct link between that claim and that style of product, with the notion that if RPGs were less violent, more people, especially, I don't know, more women and for some reason minorities, would want to play it. But it never turns out that way, right?
Well, the
if you guys
interesting
want
thing
to
is
get
that
demonetized for a third time tonight, we can go into like demographics and the type of people that play role-playing games versus the type of people in the inner cities, for instance, that might not
All right, let's stop you right
have
there.
any interest
Let's
in role-playing
stop you
games
right
at all.
there, Venger.
And then look at the
Let's
statistics
not try to get completely
between
demonetized.
violence. Okay.
But
All right.
one of the interesting things is those preliminary publications that came out in psychology over 3 decades ago, when it was effectively just dealing about tabletop for the most part, that thread of questioning gets pulled into the developing field of game studies, and they're still asking that question of video games now, and they've got this decades long body of literature that they can go back and look at. But they just keep asking the question over and over, and it never correlates.
It's because of the agenda, right? And talking of agendas, I just happened to do a little bit of research on The Guardian here. This is by no means the first article that they've done on D&D. In fact, it's not even the first article they've done on D&D and therapy. A year earlier, they did one called Facing the Demon, How Dungeons & Dragons Therapy Can Heal Real-Life Trauma. 2021, The Guardian, A Safe Haven, How Dungeons & Dragons is Slaying Social Anxiety. And we've got, what other one? There's one other one. Oh yeah, 2019, No More Nerds, How Dungeons & Dragons has finally become cool. So there's a complete agenda here, because of course leftist organizations make a point of pushing the agenda, and part of the work of leftist news media is culture kampf, and they've clearly got someone at The Guardian who's helping out with making sure that Dungeons and Dragons gets promoted in their correct ideological manner, which starts with saying we don't actually want nerds to play, and ends with D&D is actually a kind of social justice therapy.
I just did a quick search because I know the ladies that run my podcast's Twitter feed often poke fun whenever these therapy articles come. So I just did a search for in their feed for therapy, and we've got stuff going back to 2021. So yeah, this isn't new by any stretch of the imagination. It clearly isn't setting the world on fire. Do we think they're intentionally shoving this narrative over and over and over again because if they say it enough, then it will be true? Is it one of those?
That's
sort
always
of?
been their tactic, yeah.
Right? So it's very interesting that it keeps coming up and up and up. And I shouldn't have said that because that's a terrible transition to our next segment.
Well, hang on. We got some comments here from the live chat. Venger posted next Chult adventure, Meatball's tuna catch. I hope that Meatball will get some royalties from that, from the use of her person.
I got your royalties right here, Meatball, right here.
Venger, your banana's a little. Yeah,
Justin says RPGs are therapeutic; they're not therapy. Judd Goswick says a link to the game, I assume he means Dragon Slayer, would be nice. I'm sure that we'll put the link in the description in the post video.
Yep.
What else have we got here? A bit of weird stuff there.
Tonight's just weird, Pundit. What can I say?
Yeah, really. Brian's Game Night says individually it can be therapeutic, but only in a temporal sense.
I do think for those folks that maybe are a little, maybe not at the same sort of level of socialization with their peers at a young age, that can definitely be helpful for them. I think all reasonable people would recognize that. But using it for therapy, I don't really buy it. In fact, if you don't walk out of the game session triggered by something I've done, then it's probably a bad sign.
Or the expecting to be triggered, Greg, right? They're coming in with this baggage and this expectation. Mm-hmm. They want to be triggered.
The Ed Knight says all the Guardian articles were paid for by Watson. Jeff Ramdekar says role playing in therapy sessions and role playing in a fun way are different. Yeah, of course. Therapists have used role playing, some therapists, anyways, for therapeutic purposes for a very long time. But that's completely different than playing an RPG. It's not the same thing at all. All right. So what's our next on our agenda, Ryan?
Oh.
Well, I gotta go in like 5 minutes.
Well, Venger, you got 5 minutes
killing
to
time,
get the
right?
spider off.
5 minutes. $5 foot long.
Is it a foot long?
Time to show products, I guess.
All right.
You tell me. Is it a foot long?
No.
Is the camera playing tricks on you?
It's barely ripe, my friend. It's barely ripe. Do you want to talk about your Spider Jack 2 before we go to the shills, Venger? And then we'll let you show first.
Yeah, I could take 30 seconds to talk about Spider Jack 2. The guys were asking me in a Twitter DM chat if I had anything for tonight, and I really didn't. So I thought the highlight of last month's show was the whole Spider Jack hashtag meme random table that's still being hosted. The thread is kind of dead because after getting like 30 plus entries, I think we're good on that. I didn't think we needed to go to 100. I think a D30 table is fine. But I was like, you know what? If people want to contribute more Spider Jack, content, let people do it. So yeah, if people want to talk about it on the chat, or if they want to email me or post something on the RPGsite.com, let's get some more Spider Jack chat going, and we'll just talk about stuff.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. Let's do the shill thing. Venger, I know your time is the most precious, especially since we're running up.
The most precious of all times.
It is. Tell everybody about both the Chult deal and VengerCon 3.
So VengerCon 3 is the third convention that I'm organizing in July in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'll be there along with hopefully dozens of other attendees playing RPGs, old school OSR, traditional role-playing games all weekend long. Besides eating and sleeping and drinking, that's pretty much all we do. And it's an exclusive, fairly tight-knit and hardcore group of guys. We haven't had a woman yet, but maybe this year, I think, this year it is. We will have one because the guest of honor is Diversity of Dragons, and he's bringing his wife, who also role plays, I believe. So she'll be there. Maybe we'll have another woman as well. We'll double our woman attendance. And we're just gaming and having fun. And I'm going to be running Chult for people that want to play, and other people are going to be running all kinds of old school awesome games. Maybe we can get some Dragon Slayer in there. That'd be cool. I know people want to do OSE and DCC and probably some old school like AD&D or BX. So yeah, it's gonna be a good time. Chult, always running a special on the trilogy of Chult books. Or if you just want to buy the first Chult book. You know what? I had a special going for Leap Day, and that turned into a whole weekend thing. But all of this next week, if you want to buy Chult for $25 plus $5 shipping domestically, just PayPal me, and then let's do it. That's a pretty terrific deal. You're pretty much getting it for half price.
Double D
It's
just
a
volunteered
gorgeous.
to run Dragon Slayer at VengerCon for you. So there you go.
There you go. It's a gorgeous full color, professionally printed book, signed and numbered by me, and I usually draw a little tentacle or sigil or personalize it in some way. And hell, why not? I'll even bless it with the royal game mastering banana. I dub the Schultz book for you, Hoss. That's it. That's all I got. I'm done.
I think Venger is proof. I think Venger is proof that RPGs are not therapeutically useful.
Greg, since we talked about it for the whole first segment, tell everybody about where they can get Dragon Slayer and remind them. And if you want to throw the link in private chat, we'll put it in the official chat so it is clickable for everybody that is watching both live and in the archives.
Yeah, sure. So if you appreciate TSR style D&D and you enjoy the art and mechanics inspired from that era, then Dragon Slayer is right up your alley. And it's the rule set that I played in my home game that inspired Barrow Maze and Archaea and Highfell and Dwarody. So it'll work very seamlessly with all those. And I appreciate anybody that would consider it. Thank you.
Short and sweet. I like it. Pundit, you have yet another Pundit Files that is out and ready to go. They're just stacking
That's
up,
right.
my friend.
The Pundit Files come out every 2 weeks. Only available on the Red Room store. If you haven't checked out the Red Room store, you really should, because apart from my Pundit File, you can also get all kinds of very interesting products. Of course, the entire collection of the Red Room's library. But now there's a lot of other people who are also doing PDF books there. And so the Pundit File is my fortnightly periodical of interesting RPG mini products, I guess you could say. I mean, they average somewhere around 8 to 10 pages. And the latest issue is Pundit Files number 7, The Confraternity of Death, which is an adventure. It is it's for Lion and Dragon. It is set in the city of Coventry, but you can very easily kind of port that over to any kind of medium-sized city in any other setting. And it has to do with a sinister, very sinister cult and a series of grisly killings, and the player characters have to kind of investigate that and try to uncover who's behind it. And it has a couple of surprising twists, I guess you could say, that I don't want to reveal, obviously, because some people might end up running it and some other people might end up playing it. But you can check it out. It's a very good product, and like all of the Pundit Files, it costs about $3.50. So go check it out on the Red Room. And if you're not looking for an adventure, you can check out in the previous issues. You've got Pundit Files 6 was Siege Rules, Pundit Files 5, a city guide to the city of Baghdad for Sword and Caravan. But if you want to have a realistic city setting for any kind of like Middle Eastern area of a campaign world, that's a really good choice. Pundit Files 4, Fast NPC Generation. Pundit Files 3, the Renegade Martial Artist class for Sword and Caravan, but you can use that in any OSR game. Number 2 is another adventure, The Dead City, and number 1 is Tables to Shake Up Your Campaign when you want some complete, like, out of the blue setting shattering event. You can have a way to randomly generate it. So those are all the ones we have so far. By the time our next show comes along, we'll have number 8, which is Magic of the Kunlun Mountain, which is ritual magic it's for the Lion and Dragon game, but it can very, very easily be used in any other OSR game that is based on actual magic of mainly of the Tibetan plateau. So interesting stuff. So be sure to check all those out. Check out my other products, which you can find on Drive-Thru and Amazon. And I think there's always links in the description. And very soon, I hope we will have Baptism of Fire. It's on the way. We're still working through the last bits. There's been delays, but it'll be coming out sometime soon, I hope. That's all I can say about that right now.
Well, you're keeping them wanting more, right? So, Baptism of Fire coming soon.
Building up anticipation, anyway. Yeah.
Well, I have Greenhaven. We talked about it last month. People said, "Hey, Ryan, when are we going to be able to get our hands on it? Because I don't want a PDF." Well, you can now get your hands on it. Drive-through RPG. Just search Greenhaven. It is a complete system agnostic town. It has everything from NPCs, shops, inventories, events, and random tables. I know sometimes drive-throughs print on demand doesn't always come through, but I will say, for as visual as I tried to make Greenhaven, the print on demand is beautiful. Check it out. The PDF is still just $2.99. You can get all 40 pages of this beauty in your hot hands for $6.99 in print. So search for Greenhaven. I certainly appreciate it, and I love all the feedback. I am truly humbled that this little project that was sort of a throwaway for me when I started has now become the focus of what we're doing. The sequel, but it is not a sequel. It is a standalone sequel. It's the next item in the Pop-In Principles line, is about 60% done, and it is coming up. It will dovetail nicely if you have Greenhaven, and if you don't, I'll give you a tip. As opposed to a village, it is more adventure-y that is coming. But right now, Village of Greenhaven is where it's at. If you've got $6.99, go to Drive-Thru RPG and pick it up. Of course, you can always also subscribe to Nerd Cognito, one of, and we're starting to think that we might be the largest audio-only podcast in the OSR/OSR adjacent space. Any podcast provider of your choice, just search for Nerd Cognito. And we have a fun little sort of sit around, drink, and bullshit stream every Saturday, too, on YouTube. So you can find us on YouTube as well. Greenhaven for your table. I'm sure you'll like it. I priced it so that everybody can get a copy. And, hey, we'll talk at you each and every week on The Big Show. So that's all I've got. So
we've got some comments here from the crowd.
Yeah.
Calvinoni says they are gorgeous books. I think he said that in reference to Venger's books, if I'm not mistaken, because there's conversations about bananas adjacent to that one. So
they're gorgeous bananas.
I don't know, Ryan. If I posted a link, will people see it? Because I posted the link there to Dragon Slayer.
If you put the link in the private chat, I can double it up just like I did for the link to Dragon Slayer. And it will be.
I posted it in the live chat. I don't know if people saw it or not, but I posted it there, and I don't know. I guess if I have moderator status, I should
and harvest it.
Okay. Then what else have we got here? Ultra American says, RPG Pundit, I've caught up with the Pundit files, and I recently bought the Gonzo Fantasy Companion guidebook. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. The Gonzo Fantasy Companion is a great collection. Items, creatures, and tons of random generators for your kind of weird or science fantasy or gonzo fantasy type of campaign, including ways to randomly generate new races, intelligent animals, mutants. There's ways to set up. Some people just recently on the RPG site were talking about my underworld generation in Arrows of Indra. Well, in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion, you have a one for high-tech ancient complexes in like underground ruins, which is a similar kind of generator. Plus stuff like weird items, cursed items, weird monsters, all kinds of stuff, and high-tech weapons and things like that. So lots of stuff that you can use in the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. I also put a link to the Confraternity of Death there, but again, I don't know if people can see that or not. I know that when I post it on my live streams, they can, but that's because I'm the owner of the stream, right? L says, Ryan, send Pundit a copy of Greenhaven, I guess, to review. He doesn't review PDFs. That is true. I do not review PDFs. If you want to pay the shipping costs, you can send me the Greenhaven book. But one of the issues I have recently is that Uruguayan mail is horrible. It's actually the second worst in the Americas in terms of like corruption, ineptitude, and theft. Like only Haiti is worse, right? And like Haiti is basically a collapsed state, So I've been telling everybody who tries to send me books that you send them at your own risk. And really, if you want to, the only way you can be really sure that if you send it, you'll get it is if you send it by like a kind of a courier, like DHL or FedEx or something. And in spite of that, people still send me books because I guess they know that the cost might be a little higher, but when I do a review, people buy books. Okay.
We did get the links for both. Oh, wrong one. For both Greg's Dragon Slayer and Pundit Files 7. So they are in the chat. Our links, Venger, Pundit, and mine, are always in the description, and we'll get Greg's link in the description as well for later.
Thanks, appreciate it.
So at this point, do we have another topic, or are we opening it up to the chat if they want to ask questions?
Wide open. I sort of I don't know. We were talking about this off the air before we started. Going around the carousel of controversy in the TTRPG space right now, again, is the incessant debate about fudging dice rolls. But it's interesting because it seems to be an artificially created debate, and it is mostly getting traction from our dear friends, Pundit, the Bro SR. And it seems like they've latched on to this as a reason to, or as a method to create engagement. So I'm looking at it from, we all know what the fudging thing is, right? Some people are going to and always are going to. Some people are never going to and never will. And some people are going to fall in between. And guess what? Every table is different. And that's one of the beauteous things of the hobby. You can have an opinion. I certainly do. I don't like fudging dice rolls, but I'm not going to crucify someone that does in their game. And they are just going for the jugular with this one. So I don't know if you wanted to comment briefly. I don't know that it has a lot of depth because, let's face it, Bro SR, thimble. So you take it for what it's worth.
Well, I guess first, we can have a discussion about dice fudging, but just a sec here, lighting my pipe. But I guess first we should comment on the context of the Bro SR doing this. So, the Bro SR is like any other kind of shilling organization that is pretending to be some kind of a great cause. I mean, they're not very different from Black Lives Matters or something like that, right? So Black Lives Matter, every once in a while, you'll get some of these BLM people making a post about how algebra is white supremacy, or something like that, and they're doing that to get attention and then to demand money from people, right? To demand that people follow them and this sort of thing, right? So they're kind of irrelevant. But as far as dice fudging is concerned, I mean, there's always been a very long history in the game of some people doing that and some DMs doing that, and some people also saying that it should absolutely never happen, right? Like I've heard a lot of people, especially from the 3.x era onwards, that were saying stuff like DMs should always, all players and all DMs should always roll the dice absolutely in the open so that there's no secrets there, right? And that in itself is kind of counterintuitive to the tradition of old school gaming, right? Where you had the DM was rolling behind a screen or what have you, right? And the implicit suggestion of that screen is that actually the DM has a position of precedence even above the dice, because the DM is at the center of the thing. There's always been this debate, and you've seen it with like the story gamer crowd, were another group who insisted on like transparent die rolling because from their point of view, the point was that the DM should have no power at all, right? The DM should be like the banker in Monopoly, and it is the game system that has to govern. The DM isn't actually allowed to change the game system in most story games, and that goes contrary to, because if the game system is the dominant one, then that means by default the game designer is the dominant one, and he knows better how you should be role playing than the guy at your table running the game, which to me has always been a ridiculous claim. But that said, there are good and bad ways to fudge dice, and the real, this is my opinion now, right? But from my point of view, the idea of the DM fudging the dice in many circumstances is a bad idea for the DM. It's bad DMing, okay? Because if the DM is fudging the dice, often a couple of the main reasons why he might do that will be either to save the players because he's worried that they're going to have a bad reaction if they're just dead, or to save his precious plot line because the players are being too effective and are going to kill off the big bad boss who's supposed to survive the battle or something like that, And those are two absolutely awful reasons to fudge dice, There can be other reasons to fudge dice which could actually be good. For example, if you think that the result of a random table roll or something like that doesn't make sense at this moment, and then you change that, right? But a lot of dice fudging is bad, but that doesn't mean that the dice should take precedence over the DM. That's my position. I don't know what you think, Greg, or you, Ryan, but that's what I say.
Go ahead, Greg.
I don't fudge dice, and I don't want to play in a game in which dice are fudged. There should be consequences for actions, and if those consequences are lethal, then stay out of positions where you allow the DM to roll dice.
Right. I think we're all kind of on board here. If the DM has a consistent need to fudge dice, you get to the point where why have the dice, right? Mm-hmm. And that is not what I want. Inherently, of course, we all enjoy a good story. That doesn't make it a story game. We enjoy the mechanical aspects of it, and we enjoy the fact that it's a game. The dice are a component of the game. So if you are you're finding yourself constantly needing to fudge dice, are the dice really a critical component to your game? Beyond that, death is real in this game. Actions do have consequences. And sometimes actions have unexpected or out of context consequences. That's the beauty of the random dice, right? So I like I said, I am not a fan of dice fudging. That being said, I'm not going to crucify someone that does incorporate it. One of my friends is a online DM, and she runs a significant amount of games, and she's in an interesting perspective. She said, I do fudge my dice rolls. These people are paying me. And if they are not satisfied customers at the end of the day, if I go and off the party, I'm offing my income. So she got destroyed for presenting that position. And I thought it was very transparent and very honest. I said, if you're playing at my table, that's not going to happen. And if you're DMing at my table, I would hope that's not going to happen. She said, it's not. But in the capacity where I am a DM, it has to happen because I need to preserve my income. So there's a lot of other facets to this.
That in a nutshell is the problem with professional DMing, right? That's why I've never liked the idea of professional DMing.
So I don't know. It's going to come up again, 6 months later. We're going to be like, what's hot on the socials this week? And it's going to be dice fudging again. I think that my interest in this is because of how relentless our favorite subgroup is attaching this to just about everything.
Right,
So
well, they're
looking at it through.
absolutists, right? Or they present themselves as absolutists, and so they pick some of these topics to be, ridiculously absolutist about, in the hopes that some people will then, join their group and buy Jeffro's really bad books. So that's basically what it's about. But like professional DMing, like I've often pointed out that stuff like Critical Role is to D&D what porn is to sex, right? It's that. So professional DMing is a bit like going to a hooker, right? Like, you're paying them to tell you what you want to hear. Like that's not the same as the natural activity of an RPG, where the DM doesn't really have to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah, the dynamic's completely different at that point.
Yeah, I would never. I mean, I make money off of RPGs in the sense that I write them, and I have a YouTube channel and stuff like that. But I would never charge to run a game, And I have some people say, "Oh, but you could charge a lot of money. There's people desperate to play in your game." I'm like, no, I'd never, because then it would be something so tainted in my mind to do that. I don't know. Anyway, this brings me. Sorry, go ahead.
Double D gets the touche of the night in response to your Jeffro's book thing. He said Jeffro's pamphlet.
Pamphlet, yeah, correct. Correct. So actually, this makes me think of a couple of other questions that I think are a little more interesting than the dice fudging question. Okay, so I want to ask the two of you guys and everybody in the chat what their position would be on this sort of thing. Okay, so question number one would be, because I know that there's some people that make these arguments, right? So do you think that the player should be the one who rolls saving throws, or should the DM, or are there times when the DM should roll a saving throw for the player versus other times where the player should roll it?
In my opinion, if the player is making a saving throw for the character, the player rolls it. I couldn't think of a scenario in which I would want, as a DM, to roll whether a character lives or dies.
So let me give you an example, though, right? Because I've seen the argument from this point of view, right? Because there are some people, just like there are some people who suggest that the DM should never get to roll dice, right? Like the black hack is made on that principle, which is really stupid. There's also people that sometimes think that players should roll a minimum of dice, and certainly shouldn't roll dice for things that might lead to metagaming, right? So there might be a situation where you're like going through a dungeon, and let's say that there's some magical effect that will not be immediately obvious to the player character, right? So the person steps into something or puts on a ring or something like that, and you tell them, okay, do a saving throw versus magic, right? And you know that you're not going to immediately tell them why they had to do it, because it's something that at first they're not going to know why. Maybe they're enchanted, maybe they've been cursed or something like that, but that the effect is not immediately visible, right? So if the player rolls it, then the player obviously is going to know that something is up, right? They're going to know that they've just had to roll a saving throw versus magic, and if they see the result, they're going to know if they failed that saving throw versus magic, right? And then that might lead them to act in ways that is based on information the character shouldn't have, right? So there, in those cases, some people have said, well, the DM should roll the saving throw without telling the player,
But it's plausible to say that if a character entered an enchanted area, that or an area in which a spell effect is currently in place, that they might be able to detect it.
So
what do you guys think about something that I
if they had something that could detect it? Sure, yeah.
Maybe, but if it's a magic user and the spell is a magic user effect, I would have them roll that. If it's a cleric and a cleric spell effect, I would have them do that. So I don't these characters are skilled, they're trained, and so I wouldn't have a problem asking a magic user to roll in that example. I don't have to explain why, but they're allowed to have some version of spidey sense for if it's in their area of expertise.
Yeah, that's potentially fair enough. But
do you subscribe to the idea? And I've used this before, and it's management. So the lazy part of me says, I don't want to do this, but it's effective of having the characters just have a bank of pre-rolled results that you as the DM can use. So everybody pre-rolls 5 results, hands you an index card, and if you need them, there they are. It sort of solves the problem of, is my player going to metagame? He knows he just failed a saving throw for magic because I have the random roll that the character and the player provided, but I get to apply it behind the screen as a DM.
Yeah, I don't like the idea. I would still have them roll organically in the moment.
Well, see, this kind of taps into what was going to be my next question, which is basically the same sort of question with regards to, say, perception checks, right? To listen, to spot an ambush, to things like that, right? Where, again, some people say that if you're, the characters are going around and you suddenly say, oh, do a perception check, right? Then they know that there's something there, right? Now that some DMs solve this by sometimes asking people to do perception checks when there's nothing there, right? But some DMs will also do a perception check themselves for the player without telling the player if it's a situation like where they're about to be ambushed, because they're directly, obviously, if you fail the perception check, you're meant to not have an idea that you're about to be attacked, right? I don't do either of those, but what I do often in dungeons specifically, where it most comes up, is that I might have a player saying, well, I'm going to be watching here, especially if he's like the forward guy, the thief or something that is kind of going up ahead, sneaking to keep an eye on what's up ahead in the dungeon or something. He says, well, I'm going to be paying attention. Okay, so roll a perception check, right? And then that perception check kind of stands as his general perception until there's a reason for him to have to re-roll again, which means that whether he fails or succeeds, he doesn't really know when that's going to come into effect, at least,
I hate that whole mechanic. To me, it's lazy role playing. If you're observant and you constantly, I'm looking at the tree line, I'm looking here, I'm looking there, I'm checking behind me, I'm looking on the ceiling. If you're doing the things you should be doing anyway, if you were in a highly dangerous situation, you're more likely to detect those things. So unless somebody says they're looking on the ceiling, they're not looking on the ceiling. So they have to actually say that with each room, and that's the equivalent of a perception check, saying you're doing these things. And if you say you're doing them, you're likely going to find them, unless it's a very highly unusual situation or camouflage or something of that nature, or magically hidden. I don't see the need for a mechanic like that. I never have.
I think the experience levels of the players also
I
play
have
a big
story
factor in
and
this.
relates to you, Greg, about this actually. But go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
No. I was just gonna say I'll keep it short. The experience level of the players leads a lot to the answer to your question in your scenario, Pundit. Hopefully, if you have mature, experienced players, even if you do call for that check, they are not going to metagame that and apply that outside of what their characters know. We hope. We also know that there are experienced, dedicated, longtime players that are going to max the hell out of everything that they can do. So you have to know your group, and that's going to be a situational call, group to group to group.
Yeah. So that is actually, by the way, Ryan, that is the answer that I have for these questions, right? That in my own groups, I never secretly roll a saving throw for someone or secretly roll a perception check for someone or something like that, because I have confidence that my players are capable of role-playing their character, knowing that they've, I don't know, failed a saving throw without knowing what it is, or even if they do know what it is, and that they will play it out accordingly, or if they fail a perception check or something like that, then they you know, but that's because I'm very selective about what players I have in my groups, right? So it can, as you say, there can be places where you have very immature players that you know, their character isn't paying attention to anything for a really long time, and then they have to do some kind of a check and they fail the check, and then suddenly, oh yeah, well, for no reason I'm drawing my bow or something, like just because they know that something is up, you know. But anyways, my story, Greg, about this, the idea of like looking around carefully in the dungeon, actually happened from when I ran a somewhat modified version of the Barrow Maze in my original Dark Albion campaign. And of course, Dark Albion isn't a setting that is about constantly going through dungeons, but that campaign lasted for like 6 years, and there were several instances where the medieval characters went somewhere that was a dungeon-like environment, right? So I actually did have more than one modified OSR dungeon type module that I had used in different occasions. And in the case of the Barrow Maze one, when they were going through there, I had one player who was, you know, I think what happened is that he went into some room. I don't remember which room it was. This is a very long time ago now. And didn't realize that there was a trap there, and some trap happened and whatever, right? And then, so then from that point, I think it had something to do that it was on the ceiling or something, but I might be remembering that wrong, or on the walls. But after that point, for the entire rest of the game, he would, every time he went into any new area, corridor, room, he would pause and read out this litany of that. I'm looking at the floors, I'm looking at the walls, I'm looking at the ceiling, I'm looking at each tile, I'm looking at this, to the point that he did it intentionally as an act of tediousness, right? To try to annoy me because
that's good play.
And said, well, you know, what should usually happen is that I should have, you know, been able to do some kind of a roll to notice this thing, right? And so after that, he was insisting on checking everything.
Right, but so when players play paranoid like that, doing those things takes time, and that time is going to be for more random monster rolls. So they play their games, we play ours, and that's how the game's supposed. That's the dynamic of the game that makes it fun.
Yeah, I do get your point there, but that was a particularly annoying instance of that in my case. But
I get it. Yeah, I get it. Mine did the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, let me see some comments from the chat. Unless there's something else people want to add on these topics.
No, absolutely. And if you guys have any final questions, make sure to get those into the chat too, while we catch up and make sure everything's there.
Yeah, I'll need to go momentarily.
Yeah, Judd Goswick says, when did every RPG streams chat become a shit-stirring convention hall? Keep that stuff on X. Well, you know, we can't just ban L. I kid, old man. I kid. Go ahead, Brandon. Anything that we missed?
Well, speaking of L, he says, Pundit, how much do you figure Sweet Baby Inc. has influenced TTRPGs because of involvement in things like D&D, Dark Alliance, and many other video games, thanks to connection to Zoe Quinn and Anita Sarkeesian? Well, it's more than that. I've heard, I mean, I can't absolutely confirm this, but I heard that Sweet Baby Inc. was in some way involved with the you know how Wizards of the Coast made this pledge that from here on in, every D&D book that they put out is going to be, every word will be triple checked by a diversity consultants to make sure that there's no white supremacy involved, right? And so apparently, I believe that what I have heard as a rumor, I can't absolutely confirm it again, is that Sweet Baby Inc. are involved in that and are probably being paid significant amounts of money by Hasbro for this, what amounts to a protection racket, right? So yeah,
I mean,
I am really enjoying the assault on Sweet Baby Inc. I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, insensitivity reader is like saying, pay me so I can tell you how people like me will be offended by your imagination.
But here's the fallacy with that whole thing. If they find nothing wrong, they're out of a job.
Exactly.
So of
So they
course
have to
they're going
always
to
find
find
something
something
more
wrong.
wrong.
Right.
Yeah, they're commissars, 100 political commissars, 100%.
That's what they do.
Yeah,
Jeff
so-
Ramdekar. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say zero sensitivity readers involved in Dragon Slayer if you're keeping count at home. I'm the only insensitivity reader.
So Jeff Ramdekar says, besides the Bro SR and the Woke SR, what other noted subgroups are there in the TTRPG hobby space? I'm not sure.
Jeffrem, I'll take this, and it's a cheap plug. A while back, if you check in the archives, go to nerdcognito.com. We did an entire episode that broke down all of the subgroups that at least we perceive in the hobby. So, nerdcognito.com, just search for, groups or I don't know. It's there. And it's in my recent memory. So it's not going to be a hard search. It's going to be within the last 6 months that we did it. And it was a pretty complete look. So I'll take the cheap pundit.
Sure. No, check out that episode for sure. I would say that, besides the Bro SR, which are basically a cult, there's also a significant number of people who are, you could say, OSR grognard purists, right? That mostly only play kind of the clone and near clone type of games and play modules that are the type of modules that TSR would have put out, right? And don't go too far into like more experimental or avant-garde versions of OSR games that go too far away from looking like basic expert D&D or AD&D. There's those guys. And then there's also these kind of art house people. They're not around that much anymore, and a lot of them were obviously very adjacent again to the woke OSR, and some of them were absorbed into it. But like Zach Smith and some of these other guys around him that made these RPGs that were almost, they were very minimalist. They weren't particularly good. Morkborg, I guess, is still an example of that, right? They're not particularly creative in any way in terms of design, but they have a particular style aesthetic that is always this kind of flashy art style, that's often kind of, a punk art or something like that, or just unusual art, and that their work is more about an aesthetic than about introducing anything new to the OSR. So there's that group too. Both of those are generally relatively harmless, but yeah. Those are the two I could think of. Let's see what else here. Lucius Schusselmeyer says thieves finding traps should be a DM role. Okay, so you see, there are people that have that opinion.
Well, that's to me that should be, and what I put in Dragon Slayer as well is thief skill should be qualitatively experienced in a role play setting. And the role would just come last if it breaks a tie or there's some aspect of it that's still obfuscated at the end. Otherwise, qualitatively you use that role play mechanic to figure out whether a trap's there or not. It's not hard. But it does take some experience.
Yeah, that's a bit like how I handle, I don't have it explicitly written that way in my books, right? But in any of my games, like Lion and Dragon or Star Adventure or Invisible College, with skills, there's a lot of times that I just ask, do you have X skill, right? So like if you're out in the wilderness, do you have wilderness lore skill, right? And if you have that, in a lot of situations, I don't make the players roll it, right? So they roll it when they're trying to do something specifically difficult or challenging. If you're using wilderness lore to try to move through the wilderness to sneak up on an opponent, maybe you would roll it, right? But you wouldn't roll it you would have to do a roll every time you're foraging for food in the wilderness environment, right? Or something like that. So I understand that perspective, right? That you should, if you have the skill, you should be able to do things at a certain level. That maybe because that also means that player characters that don't have that skill can kind of attempt to roll it unskilled, whereas the guy that has the skill doesn't have to roll,
For a long time, I disallowed thieves just because I got bored with the qualitative or the quantitative mechanics. Pardon me. So, to me, it's aim small, miss small. If you're asking general questions, if you think a trap is there or there's a possibility of a trap and you're asking general questions, you're only going to get general answers and response. But if you start narrowing your questions, you pay more time, you investigate more closely, that will garner you a different set of answers. So it depends. Are we starting up here or are we narrowing down here? So aim small, miss small when it comes to traps.
Okay.
I like that a lot because... Go ahead, Pundit.
No, you go ahead. I was going to go to another comment.
I like that a lot because it really forces your players to really immerse themselves into what they're seeing. It's not just, I'm going to search the room for traps. It's, I'm going to search that third stair that doesn't look right from where I'm standing.
Exactly.
And then you get the level of detail that you put into your question. That's right. Spectacular.
So Josh Peters says perception checks can lead to some laziness, but constantly having to say I check for the X also leads to a bomb squad approach to adventuring, which can get a little tedious. I guess both of those are true statements.
Time, torches, there's resources that you're eating up, food, literally, if you take too long. So you force the players to balance what they're doing and make those checks count.
Keeping your character alive is a process. Commit to the process. That's simple.
Surly Unicorn says, always tell the DM you're posting a watch. Help. I hated the one time you don't mention you're posting a watch, then the DM bends you over. Well, see, that would not necessarily be good DMing unless it just happened by chance, right? Like I never believe that the DM should be punishing the players here, because let's say my players know to keep a watch when they're camping out in the wilderness or in the middle of a dungeon trying to rest or something like that. But if they didn't post a watch, you say, aha, so now I can just have this thing come out of nowhere. Like my view of the DM is that the DM is a clockmaker god, right? So he should be going in a similar way that the player character should be playing their character. He should not be an author looking for dramatic situations. He should be relying on what are hopefully well-designed, randomicity, random encounter tables or things like that.
The procedural rules indicate when those random rolls are done, and then now if they're camping out at night in the dungeon, then they should have a pretty good sense that there's probably going to be more random monsters at night than there are during the day or what have you. And those are if you want to take those chances, are you feeling lucky?
Yeah. All right. What else? Anything else here? Sir the Unicorn says, no wilderness lore. Oh, look, you ate the wrong berries. Well, yeah, sure. That is, part of wilderness lore in my games includes being able to identify what's edible. So, yeah. Lucius Schlusemeyer says, the point being the thief shouldn't know they didn't find the trap before they open the chest or the door. Yeah, well, again, that goes to whether you know that your player will play the character being loyal to the things that the player character is supposed to know, or if he's going to metagame, So a lot of these things are solutions that are meant to be a way to fix problems that aren't always there, right? So it depends on your table, right? My table usually has players that are quite good at not engaging in metagaming, but other people's tables might not. If you have a very immature group of players, you might have to do some of these things, but also you probably have to educate them in how they should be playing their character,
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, I think we got to wrap it up.
I was going to say,
right,
I
so
know
we
Greg
can probably
is
wrap it up too then. Yeah.
Running out of time. I want to thank everybody in the chat for stopping by and having a good conversation. We don't always agree, but we always have a good chat on the Sunday night. Inappropriate characters, whatever that may be. Pundit, if you want to look at the calendar, our next episode is scheduled to be 1, 2, 3, April
7th of April,
7th.
I believe.
April
Yep.
7th.
April 7th.
So everybody mark your calendars, set your clocks. April 7th for the next episode of Inappropriate Characters. We want to thank Greg Gillespie for stopping by. We know Barrow Maze and Dragon Slayer. If they sound like they would be an excellent fit, we encourage you to go pick them up. Make sure that you're following the RPG Pundit here on YouTube. He puts out some quality videos, Venger as well, and the Nerd Cognito channel. You want to make sure that you do those things. You can also find all of us, I believe. Greg, are you on Twitter? No.
Not often.
Not often, but you can find us. But Greg may not be there enough. All of the Twitter handles are in the show descriptions. Thanks for stopping by, Pundit. Any final thoughts?
Yes. Well, if any of you have just stumbled upon this live stream and have not yet subscribed, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss, or so that there's a less of a chance, because YouTube isn't always reliable, that you won't miss the next episode and future episodes. And
we have that
again,
obtrusive video intro that'll help you get that notification too. So
if you want to support us, you check out our products, but you can also support us here with super chats or with like Venger said, joining our Patreon, or there's multiple methods. So check that all out and share the video if you can, because that always helps.
All right. Hey, Greg, thanks again for stopping by. It was good to have an interesting
thank
chat,
you
and
very
you got
much.
to play with the shenanigans that we talked about, the stuff that's going on in the hobby too. So
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to speak to you again, Pundit, and nice to meet you, Ryan.
Yep. Thanks everybody in the chat as well. We will see you April 7th, 8 p.m. Sunday night. Inappropriate Characters. Have a good night, everybody.